We are all given an identity when we're born, whether we're aware of it or not. Over time, we can eventually piece together our personality by labeling ourselves. These labels can sometimes be something we can change, such as our favorite music or style. But most of the time, we're being identified by our race, sexuality, even just our names. These are things we cannot change. We can only come to accept them. I have a friend who recently changed his whole identity, going as far as changing it legally. Now, as bad as that sounds, he did have a legitimate reason for doing so. My friend Kai was not known as Kai throughout his childhood. Instead, he was called Lily. You see, my friend Kai now identifies himself as a transgender boy. This means that from the day he was born, society treated him with a predetermined stereotype that he ended up not being comfortable with. Growing up in a white Christian household, Kai wasn't exactly aware of the term transgender until he was older. He was, essentially, isolated from different perspectives during this time. However, that does not mean that he underwent a period of isolationism. I use isolationism not in the historical sense, but to describe a lifestyle that encourages solitude and independence from others. Because of this, isolationists are usually introverted. They value time spent with themselves rather than with other people. This is an example of what isolationism cannot accomplish. While isolating yourself from the influence of others' influence, it allows you to reflect on self-identity and try to understand yourself better. However, you cannot create new knowledge from this isolationism. This is where human collaboration allows for individuals to gain information from school, friends, and the surrounding community. By being exposed to the LGBTQ+ community at school, Kai was able to find a new label that allowed him to correctly identify with himself. However, Kai had a much more difficult decision to make. If he was going to go through legally and permanently changing his appearance, he was going to have to do the unthinkable: tell his parents. He believed that by doing so, he would be letting down any hope that his parents had of his former self. The image that his mom and dad had would be destroyed in an instant because he was not the little girl that he used to be. In Kai's mind, this all boiled down to one thing: the worth of self-identity. Was fulfilling his newfound identity worth devastating his friends and family? That was a decision he had to make on his own. No one else should influence his own personal morals and values. He had to face the consequences of his own actions. In order to drown out the noise of society's influence, he had to separate himself from the world. However, Kai didn't exactly choose isolationism. It was forced upon him in the form of depression. This depressive period was a result of a number of factors: the stress of a new school, loss of friends, worsening of his mother's sickness, but more prominently, his lack of self-identity. Kai didn't know how to relabel himself in order to fit into the standards of society. As Kai distanced himself from family and friends, he found himself getting closer and closer to himself. This allowed for him to reflect on personal meaning and, in turn, increase his awareness with himself. He realized that he shouldn't sacrifice his own happiness at the expense of others, including his parents' expectations. And even if he faced negative judgment from his peers, he could always find reconciliation within himself. In this way, he could put himself first in order to make sure he could successfully grow and live how he intended to live. The reason he was able to finally overcome this depressive period was because he found self-confidence in his new identity. He realized that he could either make his parents happy by maintaining their image of a perfect daughter, meanwhile spiraling down the hill of depression and self-hatred, or he could accept that this was not who he was supposed to be. Obviously, Kai chose a selfish choice. I call it selfish because it is inherently an act of self-preservation. He didn't do this for anyone else, he did this wholly to benefit himself. Because in order to find your self-worth and self-identity, you have to be selfish. You have to be selfish enough to put yourself in front of others in order to take time for yourself to figure out what you actually need in this time of your life. Self-identity is also a reflection of personal meaning, or what we value most. Everyone is constantly striving to find personal meanings within their lives. For some, it's fame and wealth. For others, it's acceptance and happiness. Each and every one of these meanings is different. This is why isolating yourself from the influence of others' personal meaning allows for you to create your own. Kai's period of isolationism allowed for him to create a new mental, physical, and emotional self-identity of a trans boy. He now lives both legally and socially as Kai, and watching him come out of his shell has been one of the most inspiring things I've seen. However, the question is, have you done the same? Have you been through the process of legitimizing your own personal needs and wants? We're too easily influenced by social media and friends that we often forget how to live our own lives, let alone live with our own self-identity. It's a process figuring out who you are and what you stand for. So I suggest to each and every one of you today that you take time for yourself in order to reevaluate your self-identity and self-worth. This does not necessarily mean distancing yourself from everyone and everything that you love, just that you spend time alone to not get distracted by society's influences. Especially to the teenagers out there struggling with finding their self-identity in this growingly anti-individualistic world, where society is quick to group people together based on identities. Kai's personal struggles allowed for him to create a new self-identity through isolation, but no single experience is universal. In the end, your own personal self-identity will be shaped by your personal struggles and experiences. Good luck, and thank you.